day to you folks of YouTube. I am your host Vert343 and I'm here to welcome you to my new series. Welcome to Retrospective. Retrospective is a series designed to talk about games from the past, how they relate to their time, how they hold up today, and most importantly, whether they're overrated, underrated, or fairly rated. To achieve that goal, each episode will contain a full analysis of the game in question, and then a comparison to the reviews given at the time. But, of course, this is all from the perspective of a slightly retarded 16-year-old Brit, so it'll usually be wrong and worth arguing in the comments section. However, if by some miracle you'd actually like to see more of this, or my review series Is It Stroke Was It Great, then click that subscribe button and enable notifications through the bell icon to always see my uploads, because I guess subscribing isn't enough. For this first episode, we're starting off with a game regarded as an absolute classic must-play title, Half-Life 2. Half-Life 2 is a game released by Valve Software in 2004, and if you didn't know that already, you're either too young to play actual video games, too old to like video games, or like me, a 16-year-old British twat who's somewhere between too young to play and nostalgic, like an awkward middle child. Starting off as I would for any other game with the graphics, Half-Life 2, being from 2004, has graphics worse than my prospect of owning a decent house any time in my life. However, seeing as this game is from 2004, I have to compare it to games from, well, 2004, such as Doom 3, GTA San Andreas and Halo 2, all of which have worse textures and overall graphics in my opinion. However, this alongside the large-scale environments does come at the cost of having a much flatter design. However, even though the design is flatter, everything important is much more detailed, with faces especially looking far better than any others of their era, and the animations are also pretty damn good for the era, being above par in their fidelity and general fluidity. Unlike in any of my other videos, it's time to talk about environments. The environments of Half-Life 2 are extremely important and extremely well detailed. From the very first scene on the train, you get a sense of the environment, a sense of the world, a sense of insight into the world that you don't get from other video games, which is the genius of Valve's storytelling. And as someone who has never played the original Half-Life, I was extremely surprised with how immersed I got into the world. First looking out of the train windows, watching the terrain fly by, and then arriving in City 17. As I got off the train, the dirty, grimy and generally unsanitary platform adorned in barriers with combined civil protection standing around. Looking up to see where the voice of Dr. Wallace Breen was coming from and seeing his face on the screen. Watching as he talks about how City 17 is safe and how it's great. And then I turned the corner, saw a man getting hit by civil protection for being too slow with his bags, before I made my way through a turnstile and got pulled to the side and saved by a character more annoying than suddenly inserting a joke into an extremely serious description, known as Barney. Besides the very first scene, this game is full of environmental and contextual details, egging you on to save these people in the most subtle ways possible, but it's also one of the most hard-hitting ways. During a scene where the rebels fight off the Combine, you come across two people, one consolidating the other over the terrible situation they're in and how they're going to be killed by the Combine. Although getting run over by a Combine doesn't sound fun, they were sobbing in front of the saviour of mankind, Gordon Freeman. The other awesome thing you get in the environments is the experience of exploring the Combine's designs and architecture, which is extremely interesting in comparison to the basic realistic city you otherwise play in. Personally, I really enjoyed exploring the different architectural style of the Combine, especially when exploring the Citadel. The characters of Half-Life 2 are mostly roughly halfway through their lives, assuming they were to die of old age, but besides being mostly middle-aged, the characters are actually pretty good. You've got a pretty wide array of interesting characters, from scientists to slightly crazier scientists with pet head crabs, to girls who are just too badass to die in the worst of situations, to a girl scientist who isn't just a double agent but a fucking quadruple agent. Most of the characters are extremely likeable, with genuine motivations and amazing voice actors, and then there's this game's resident annoying orange, Barney. Barney is my least favourite character thanks to that one fucking scene where you have to throw grenades into windows and he's constantly reminding you. Besides him, every other character, including Dr. Wallace Breen, the bad guy, seems like a reasonable and likeable character. Yes, even the villain, since his motivations are in the right place, just not his actions. Although more of a side character than a real character, I really did fall in love with Dog, due to something I personally enjoy: the use of body language and actions to uphold his intent. Dog is an extremely well animated character that shows a lot of emotion even though he's A, a robot, and B, doesn't speak. You heard me right. I got emotionally attached to a chunk of metal that strictly speaking doesn't have a face and certainly has no soul. Gameplay-wise, Half-Life 2 is pretty interesting, since it offers an extremely open-feeling map with a lot of secrets. I fucking love this map design. The open-ended maps with secrets similar to those of Doom are perfect for this kind of game. The big open maps help to give a really good sense of scale and environment, and I found myself accidentally falling into the correct path, which leads me to believe there are actually many ways to the end of the game, which, if I am correct, allows for a lot of replayability. However, I can't be sure because I only had time to play once. Sadly, the gunplay is the one element Half-Life 2 doesn't have down quite as well as other games. The guns themselves are just fine, with every gun except the starting pistol being useful until the very end of the game. And even though the arsenal itself isn't anything special at a glance, it's entirely functional and pretty well balanced. What I do have to commend about the weapons is some of the weapons' unique looks and the secondary fire modes. The secondary fire modes are pretty awesome because of just how unique some of them are. The pulse rifle, for example, has a secondary fire mode which is one of those crazy generator plasma ball things which the Combine Elites fire at you sometimes and drop, while the submachine gun has a secondary grenade launcher because useful. Besides the guns, you also get two entirely different, uniquely uncontrollable vehicles, the airboat and the scout jeep, appearing in that exact order. The airboat handles like a realistic hovercraft would, except if you replace the entire steering and propulsion system with some unturnable jet thrusters strapped to the back and a desk fan to be used for steering. The jeep, on the other hand, can actually turn, but has an input delay similar to what you'd get if you used a 35-mile long USB cord to connect your computer to your keyboard. Thankfully, both have fairly powerful, highly responsive onboard guns, at least for the majority of your time driving them. The airboat's gun is far superior, as it's the Combine gunboat's weapon, which is actually pretty great to be honest, while the Jeep has a sort of slow-firing rifle thing that is nowhere near as good, but doesn't need to be used as much. For enemies, Half-Life 2 features the Combine, a group of enemy types ranging from gun-wielding humans to massive murder robots with legs as long as skyscrapers are tall. The most common enemies you'll fight are standard Combine humanoids with standard weapons and zombies, although you do sometimes get to fight the array of more interesting looking enemies, which usually end up just being rocket launcher fights or explosive barrels or vehicle mounted weapons because your small arms are completely useless against them. There is, however, a weapon that saves Half-Life's gameplay by spicing up the variety of ways in which you can kill enemies. That item is the gravity gun. The reason I didn't mention the gravity gun under weapons is it's not intended as a weapon in the lore. By design, it's a tool. However, you can use it to great effect as a weapon. You can fling explosive barrels at enemies, cut zombies in half by throwing buzzsaws at them, and use it to carry something to shield yourself with, among other badly planned out attempts at killing things with just a shred more interesting of a method than just shooting them. Towards the end of the game, you do get a single upgrade that really made me happy: the Super Gravity Gun. The superior version of the gravity gun is, well, it's what you'd get if you decided to put a black hole inside a gun alongside an explosive charge large enough to launch a human into the stratosphere. Sadly, you don't get to play with it for too long, but it is a fun weapon to play with. At times, you do get to command two different types of allies: antlions and soldiers. The antlions are commanded with the use of bug bait and act like a private army of douchebags who can get in your way at times and happen to maul random Combine. They also do reappear every so often in the one level where you do get to use them, which is useful since you can basically send them on a suicide charge. The soldiers, however, use a proper squad mechanic where you can just have up to 4 human soldiers blocking your path at any time that you command around with the C key. Thankfully, this allows you to tell them to fuck off. One thing that really elevated the gameplay above other shooters in my opinion is the soundtrack. The soundtrack of Half-Life 2 is awesome. It's awesome to a point of standing up to games like the original Doom, which are renowned for their epic use of music. Although the soundtrack isn't perfect, and you might not remember every note like you will coming out of a game like Doom, you will certainly remember the segments it was used to highlight due to its brilliant timing and extremely good composition. Glitches wise, there was so little to speak of I almost forgot to write this section, so feel free to laugh at my stupidity. As the perceptive person in the audience might remember, I did say at the start that I would be comparing this game to its reviews to determine whether it's underrated, fairly rated or overrated. Obviously, if we're going to compare to the ratings, we actually have to see the ratings, and for Half-Life 2 most reviews rated it around a 9.5 or a 9.6 out of 10, with some straying as low as 9.2. Personally, I think Half-Life 2 is objectively a great game, but overall I'm a little unsure on whether it's worth a rating as high as 9.7. Overall, there is very little this game does badly. Every single element is far above average for 2004, and the gunplay, even though I rag on it compared to today's standards, isn't bad at all, especially for 2004. Depending on what perspective you look at Half-Life 2 from, it either is or isn't a 9.5 worthy game. If you look at it from purely a shooting perspective, I'd have to pin it on a solid 9 out of 10 for 2004, but if you look at it more focused on the storytelling than the shooter elements, it's easily worth a 9.5 out of 10 in my opinion. Overall, I would therefore have to say Half-Life 2 is a fairly rated game. Even though it's nowhere near a 9.5 out of 10 by 2019 standards, it's a game well worth playing that I personally had a lot of fun beating for this video. And that's it. If you enjoyed and want to see more Retrospective or Is It Stroke Was It Great, then please like, comment, subscribe and hit that bell icon to see all of my uploads. Thanks for watching. I have been your host Vert343, signing off. Peace out, gentlemen.